All right. Well, welcome everyone to our virtual information session for the Doctor of Philosophy of Education here at the Johns Hopkins School of Education. My name is Serena Stewart. I am the Assistant Director of Admissions. I have with me today Dr. Hunter Gelbach and then also my colleague in admissions. I'm going to turn it over to her so she can introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is John.
So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded. We will go ahead and send out the link to the webinar in about 10 days for the recording. And then at the end of our session, we will do a Q&A. Just be aware that as we are doing the presentation, if you have any questions that pop up, go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. That Q&A session will be at the end of the webinar. And we'll go ahead to the next slide. So it is my pleasure to introduce today's faculty presenter. Dr. Hunter Gelbach is a faculty lead of the PhD program. He joined the School of Education in 2019. Dr. Gelbach received his PhD at Stanford University. His research focuses on improving the social and motivational context of schools. And then lastly, Dr. Gelbach was recently named an American Psychological Association Fellow for their Educational Psychology Division. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Gelbach.
All right, thank you so much. So huge thank you for your patience. It turns out that in PhD programs, they don't teach you too much about like which, HDMI cords and USB cords actually get the projectors going. A lesson in hard learned. The discussion today, and I do hope you'll treat this as a conversation and ask questions along the way. I'm going to try and pitch at sort of two levels, right? One is I assume at least a couple folks are probably interested in PhDs at Johns Hopkins, and so there'll be information there. But probably a number of folks are interested in applying to PhDs more generally, more broadly. If you really want to do a PhD, you're probably not going to just apply to one program. So I'll talk about Hopkins specifically and some kind of more general guidance. So in that spirit of more general guidance, I think there are some really key questions to ask yourself kind of right out of the gate. So one is like, what do I want at the back end? What kind of career do I want to pursue? And does that even require a PhD? If the answer is no, putting 4, 5, 6 years into something, into a degree you don't actually totally need, you could probably do other things with your life that might be more fun. So that's like a key question just to start out with. I think also it's a commitment to lifestyle, right? And so thinking through like, is this the time that I can afford sort of PhD level wages? If I have a significant other, are they on board with me like holding up and doing a dissertation for many hours? So thinking through all the sort of lifestyle repercussions, I think is really helpful. Having a clear sense of what you want to study. So I will encounter some students from time to time who sort of say, oh, I'm super excited to do a PhD. Oh, that's great, fascinating. What do you want to do your PhD in? Oh, well, I don't really know. Well, you are committing a huge amount of time to study to become like a super expert on some presumably pretty narrow topic. And so if you're interested in an education that is much broader and wider, turn on the camera. Okay. If you're interested in a much, excellent, broader, wider education, then, a PhD might not be quite the right degree. But if you do want to go really deep and become an expert in one particular fairly narrow area and are interested in academic research, maybe it is the right degree for you. So one of the things I found when I was looking around at different PhD programs was researching, doing lots of research into the programs, like what does Johns Hopkins offer? What does Harvard offer? What does Stanford offer? What does UPenn offer? What does University of Virginia offer? What about Michigan? All of these, by finding out like who's in that program, what are they studying, what kinds of questions they're asking, it helped me really better calibrate. Yeah, is this the place that might be a good fit for me, or somewhere else? And do I want to do educational psychology or school psychology, or psychological studies in education? Is there really a difference there? So all of these sorts of in the weeds questions can lead to a much better sense of what a program is really like. So one other thing that I think is worth just in terms of preliminaries putting a little bit of time into is making sure we're all kind of clear on the difference between a PhD degree and an EDD degree. And I'll do this from sort of a Hopkins-centric mode, but I think a lot of these kind of hold true for other EDD programs as well. So for the most part, figuring out course credits and accumulating enough credits is not your huge obstacle to overcome. Obviously, the PhD requires 72. Most people transfer in 12. And so really that number tends to be more like 60 because everyone has to have a master's coming into the program. EDD is 54, so slightly different there. EDD, I think the aspiration is that people complete it in 3 years, but and the PhD is typically a little longer, 4 or 5. But some of the big differences are EDD, you're working full time, right? So you have a full-time job, and you're sort of taking on the extra coursework. It's remote, so a lot of asynchronous classes, whereas the PhD, at least here, is full-time in person. I think they're actually even shifting away from a dissertation now, but it is a set of applied projects that are very much localized to the context that you're in. So you're teaching in a school, you're working in a district, you're a school leader of some sort, you're thinking about researching problems and issues and possibilities in that context, whereas the PhD is really oriented much more toward, I want some generalizable knowledge that might apply and help lots and lots of schools and lots of different sorts of places. So the primary audience is really kind of different then, right? So, you know, school leaders want to do applied research, or, you know, researchers trying to become an expert in a particular field, in a particular area, and generalizing those findings. So far, so good. That makes sense. So then in this last little bit, career pathways, you'll see sort of an array and a range of different school leader types, which is kind of the typical pathway for the EDD. That's why you're getting that degree. Whereas, you know, our faculty members, you know, may need to start first as a postdoc, but a lot of them are becoming professors, academic researchers, places like SRI, AIR, American Institutes of Research, MDRC, RAND is another one that do educational research. A lot of those shops will. That's a good fit for the PhD degree. They'll like to see that. Some educational consulting as well, but typically it's the type of research is much less applied, and the goal is broader generalizability. So let's imagine you're clear on all that, and you decide, no, the PhD is really what I want. How can we get you guys? And one of the reasons I really love doing this session in particular is because I feel like you're all from Hopkins. We can give you some inside scoop and some extra secrets. So thing number one about the Hopkins program, so it is very much a sort of research orientation. So I think you can find programs that maybe think more about sort of policy or counseling kinds of things where you go off and be a professional counselor. But for Hopkins, it's very much a research orientation, and it is trying to sort of blend, it's interdisciplinary, so it's trying to blend two different strands. So we have a pretty strong sort of educational psychology strand and a strong sociology kind of strand. And the idea is to blend those to impact educational practice and policy. From my standpoint, especially since you're here, kind of the most important thing you could do is to, you know, thoroughly go through kind of the faculty web pages and figure out like who's doing stuff that I'm interested in, who would be a fit for a potential advisor, connecting with them before actually applying to the program. So to me, that's one of the best sort of moves you could make. If you were applying this year, I would say start that process right now. We can start it a couple weeks ago, like figuring out who potential advisors would be and who's a good fit for you and your research. It's invaluable. So with that, then a couple just sort of nuts and bolts in terms of the program. Most people are finishing 4 to 5 years. Other places, not Hopkins, this could be a little bit longer. We fund our students fully for 4 years with a fellowship. Covers tuition, there's a stipend, health insurance, dental insurance. As part of that training, you also complete 2 teaching assistantships. So even if you were to go off and just be a researcher, we feel like you're always teaching people about the results that you're finding. So getting these skills down that you would get through a teaching assistantship would be super, super helpful. A couple more, you know, getting into more of the weeds of the program then. There's a big research methods emphasis here, so you'll find different PhD programs kind of have different specialties and different signature characteristics. So I think one of ours is very much a lot of emphasis on research methods. I think we're really good at that. I think that's one of our strengths. So in addition to taking 18 credits there, you're going to have these core seminars. So it's interdisciplinary. So a couple more sociology-oriented courses, more psychology-oriented courses, more policy-oriented courses. Sociocultural is another one. We may blend econ of education into there soon. Got a faculty meeting tomorrow, so I'll start feeling out the faculty. For the moment, it's kind of those 4 areas spread across 5 classes and 15 credit hours. And then you get some freedom, right? You get to choose, well, I'm really interested in these topics, and you can take electives up to 21 hours, credit hours there. And then a lot of what you're doing, just to sort of tick off the last credits, is dissertation research. So the coursework part, that's kind of how that works. And this is really, really common for most PhD programs. Like sometimes master's programs will have a milestone, like you have to write a master's thesis, we have to do some project, we have to submit a portfolio. For PhD programs, much more typical to have maybe not all of these, but some combination of them. And at Hopkins, we do currently have all of them. So comprehensive exams. So you take more courses in your first 2 years and do more independent research your last couple of years. And so that comprehensive exam, kind of at the end of year 2 before you start year 3, tends to be, hey, let's stop and pause and check and make sure you learn stuff in those first 2 years of coursework. After you get over the comprehensive exam hurdle, then you have a dissertation proposal. And sometimes that occurs very shortly thereafter. Sometimes people, you know, do a little bit of research, more lit review first, and then get into the, okay, now I think I know really what my research interests are, and I can do a dissertation proposal defense. And then obviously, probably the thing that PhD programs are most famous for, a doctoral dissertation defense. And that's, you know, depending on if you're trying to get through the program in 4 years or 5, that's kind of the last big hurdle you have. Let's pause there. Any questions so far? No one's left the room screaming, so I feel like this is a good sign. All right, let's keep going a little bit, but do pipe in with questions as you have them. Again, Hopkins is unique. They have different features of the program, different characteristics. And one of the things I think you really want to try to figure out is, are we the right fit for you? And similarly, if you're kind of interested in some other programs, are they the right fit? Do they have the right faculty? Do they have the expertise you're looking for? Is the structure of the program the kind of education that would fit you, that you would really like? And so this is my very informal list of like the top 5 signals that like Hopkins. So thing number 1, you're looking for an apprenticeship kind of experience. So we pair students with advisors, or might be one advisor, might be 2, there's some co-advising, or it might even be a small team, but you're working closely with faculty members as a key part of your educational experience. And so that's obviously not the coursework. That's important too. And I think we have a nice balance of like, you've got a cohort of students who come in with, typically about 5 students get admitted a year, so it's small. But a huge piece of your education is this close work with an advisor. Maybe they have a group of students that they work with and part of that group. But it's this one-on-one or at least highly individualized mentoring. So if you're looking for that, this is a good place to do that. If you're looking for interdisciplinary education, this is a great place. If you want to go deep in economics of education, then it's not, we don't really do that. We're going to make you take some interdisciplinary courses and get the benefits from different approaches to thinking about problems. We think that's education. Educational problems are hard enough. We think you need the help and the benefits from a couple different disciplines to do that. The rigorous methodology, we talked about a little bit, so definitely just to re-emphasize that. All right, this next one, we want to learn research approaches of the future. That probably needs a little unpacking. I don't think there is a mic up here. Okay. Yeah. But I can yell more, so if I'm a little quiet. Okay, great. I will harken back to the days of when I was teaching 10th graders and I would yell above the fray. Okay. Thank you. So research approaches of the future. So I think educational research is at this like really kind of tension point, and we have lots of knowledge we've accumulated because we've done lots of analyses and we analyze things this way and that way and the other way, and we're super thorough. But we might be too thorough in the sense that we might actually be torturing our data until it tells us what we want to hear. So there's this whole movement in education toward open science. And so one of the huge kind of characteristics of open science is trying to get the balance right between thoroughly analyzing your data and torturing your data. And I think what we're about to find out is that we've been torturing our data a lot. And so lots of the practices and research and things we think we know about education, I think we're about to find out, oh, we don't really know those. Open science also emphasizes things like replication, right? So we really want to run the same study over in a different context, try it again with a different population, try it out with different measures, see if we're still getting the same results. Once we start seeing the same pattern of results over and over, we can have more faith in those findings. Things shouldn't be hidden behind paywalls, right? It shouldn't only be students who are at wealthy universities like Johns Hopkins who get access to knowledge. So the publishers often make you pay ridiculous, like $35 if you want this article. And it doesn't take long before that adds up to real money if you get a couple articles. Hopkins pays that for everyone here, faculty and students, but that's not true and it's not affordable in lots of other parts of the world. So part of this open science movement is to make knowledge out in front of paywalls, articles that are accessible to everyone, open data, open code, so sharing all your methods. Anyway, want to learn research approaches to the future, come here. We do a lot of open science stuff. I think that's where the field is going. And I think while we're in this transition phase, if you come here, you'll be kind of ahead of the curve and you'll learn these things before it kind of catches on in the rest of the field. Totally fine to go somewhere else, but I think eventually you're going to have to learn the same set of techniques later. And then you may look back over your research, past research, and be like, ooh, was I torturing my data until it told me what I want to hear? Maybe I don't believe that study that I did anymore. So I feel like this is a good place to come to just sort of get ahead on that. And last thing is, we really do care about influencing practice. So I think there are places you could go in PhD programs and lots of good merit to doing it this way, where it's research for research's sake. So we just want to improve theory, or we just want to test this result because it'll help us understand the brain better. There are no real world applications. And then other places that are very focused on like just solve practical problems. Obviously EDDs are a little bit more like that. We're greedy here. We want both. We want your research to help theory and to help practice. So that's, I would say, another kind of calling card. And one thing on this final note, and this bridging research that takes us from theory to influencing policy to influencing practice, a lot of how that happens here is through partnerships where some of our faculty researchers will connect with local practice kind of organizations. So we have different setups for that, different ways that happens, but this idea of research practice partnerships is a pretty helpful way to do that. Please, yeah.
So just introduce that there are two major research areas. One is learning sciences and psychology, the other is more sociology and practice policy. So I wonder for that on average 5 students get admitted every year. So what is the proportion going to each area and is that focus?
So remember, it's sort of two disciplinary areas and applying it in policy settings. So it's sort of psychology and learning sciences on the one hand, and sociology on the other hand, trying to influence educational policy. So if you want to think of educational policy as its own separate thing, then maybe we should say we're sort of interdisciplinary with 3 different foci. But anyway, your question is still a good one. What's the breakdown? Well, we kind of don't have a clear breakdown because students typically get excited to pull a couple things from these big ideas in sociology and a couple theories from psychology and wanting to influence this little realm of practice. So that's really what the interdisciplinary idea is that people don't become just an educational psychologist or just a sociologist of education, but they're really integrating these backgrounds. That's my long-winded way of not answering your question, but I hope that's helpful. Okay, great. Anything else before we shift on to the next slide? Please. Generally, yes. So you are still doing research in that first 2 years, just maybe a little bit less. And you still might take coursework in your 3rd year, and you still have, and maybe audit something in your 4th year. So it's not cut and dry. but it's more coursework heavy in the early going and more independent research heavy in the latter couple of years. Make sense? All right, so I've tried to pitch you guys on how we impact education. So let me offer you a little evidence as budding educational researchers. You probably want some data. This is Education Week, sort of popular magazine that a lot of teachers read, a lot of school leaders read. And so I just want to highlight this, and there will be more following this. But this is, you know, folks here kind of, to some degree, their research makes the news, right? So this is a report, pretty prominent, like, stop, at least for a while, she's a pretty prominent education reporter. Sarah Sparks and Amanda Diesel is the first author on this, and she was one of our PhD students, and this was part of her dissertation project. So it's getting covered in the news. So that's one way we're impacting education, right? Is reporters pick up on some of this research and say, this is great. More recently, current student, Sarah Caroleo, is writing in EdWeek itself. And so she is authoring stuff where she's kind of synthesizing some research and talking about it. And she got it published in the very same outlet. Journal articles, a much more sort of standard way to think about influencing educational practice and educational policy. I like to point this one out because this is a recent alum of ours, Natalie, and Winnie was a faculty member here. And so even after graduation, faculty members and students are still working closely together, which I think is common and also says a fair bit about our program. Next one, this is Jody Miller's stuff. I don't know if you guys have met Jody at all. She's still hanging out here as a postdoc. But her research, her little app that she does that helps little kids tell teachers kind of how they're feeling every morning, is being used in dozens and dozens of schools, and has gotten press coverage both on a local CBS station. She's on Good Morning America recently as well. So, you know, other ways that we're sort of impacting education is through building products, which is kind of maybe not the most common, but kind of cool and kind of interesting. I think this is my last one. So I like this one for two reasons. So Paula and Logan are 2 different years in the program, and they do not share an advisor. But the program is tight enough that they got to know each other and collaborated. And so they are influencing education in a different way. This is a policy brief. This is I think this is, the Urban Institute, that's right. So this got published by a sort of think tank that focuses on educational outcomes. In addition to influencing and impacting education, we also do pretty well in terms of our students winning, you know, national level acclaim and awards. Just a quick sample here, the Spencer Foundation Award, very prestigious. This is some money to help pay and allow you to spend time working on your dissertation. We had another student inducted into the Shea Honor Society last year. Another student, this was a year ago, won the ARA Minority Dissertation Fellowship. So other examples of students doing pretty well here. And just to put a couple names and faces together, the folks you see on the board in front of you. Rebecca is the one at Vanderbilt currently. So she's 2 or 3 years, sorry, I've lost track. Just started as an assistant professor at Vanderbilt. She's a couple years in. So she's in actually the anthropology department there, which is sort of to your question about like which disciplines are people going into. They were so excited about her, and her methods are more anthropological. So we're mostly kind of psych studies and sociology and policy, but not exclusively. We're even more interdisciplinary than that. Sue is doing a postdoc at the University of Virginia, sort of studying and focusing on early childhood stuff. So that's sort of another career path that a lot of our students end up on. And then Amanda, who I just mentioned, had the vision study that we just talked about a second ago. She's so good, we couldn't let go of her. So she's here working in one of our centers. All right, and so here's a little sense of cross-section of folks who are, with a couple exceptions, currently in the program. There are a couple grads here, as you probably could figure out. And so last quick thing from me, and then I wind up and here to take any questions. Sorry, we've seen that, so I'm gonna keep us going. All right, so we talked about these 5. Maybe one thing I'll add on to that is thinking about your advisor and this advisor fit. So if Hopkins is the right place for you, you're probably finding someone who shares some research interests with you. So that advisor fit is a key element of the sort of overall fit. Okay, here was the last thing for me. So what are some of the ways, right? Because I read lots and lots of these applications every single year. And so this is a little bit from me, but I get the sense that a lot of faculty members sort of share this sense of things. What are some strategies to make your application a little bit more successful? Well, communicating with faculty, figuring out who those prospective advisors are, super important. Great question to ask them. Are you taking students next year? Sometimes people go on sabbatical and are not taking students. Do they plan on being at the institution moving forward? If they are currently courting a great offer from some other institution, or they've got family things and they need to move and leave, like, you want to know if your advisor is going to be there when you show up. Things change, but like, you might as well ask and at least figure out if their current plan is to be there. I think it is sort of in that same vein. It is risky to put all your eggs in one basket. Like, if you're like, most of the faculty I don't really feel like I kind of gel with, but this one person's amazing, that feels high risk, right? If you get there and the person's not kind of who you thought they were at first. So I think having a couple different faculty members who you'd be excited to work with is really helpful, good strategy for applying, and then mentioning that in the application itself, right? So signaling, love to work with so-and-so, but also excited to work with so-and-so. That's going to look a little bit better on the application. So you've communicated with key faculty, you found more than one, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. Next biggest thing I think you can do is come in with that personal statement and talk about a research question, not just a topic. So the key question for us is we're trying to figure out what is your potential as a researcher. And if you can come at us with an interesting research question, as opposed to I'm interested in topic X, it just sets your application apart from the rest of the crowd in a really helpful way, and gets more excitement and interest from other faculty members. So as you're recruiting recommenders, we require 3 letters of recommendation. And so you want to think a little bit about, like, who's going to complement, my personal statement. I can say these things about myself. Oh, but this person in particular could say this other thing that I think is important to get across. So thinking about kind of the whole constellation of your package going in and making sure you kind of hit all the right messages you want is really helpful. So it may be that some other recommender maybe knows you better, but if they can't speak to the things that are important for us to know about you, you might want a slightly different recommender. But typically it's kind of the 3 mostly faculty members, sometimes more of a professional reference, but you know, people who can speak to your ability as a researcher. So with that, let me turn it over and we'll go through a few of the sort of logistical things and then open it up for questions. So.
All right, so moving on to the admissions application requirements. So you'll need to submit an online application form. So, and for the application fee, on the identifier status, that section of the application, if you just check off that you're a current student, the application fee will be waived. You'll need a resume, personal statement, a writing sample, 3 letters of recommendation. Official GRE scores are required for this program, and you'll also need your official transcripts. So most likely your transcripts that you sent we probably have them, and it'll automatically transfer over to the new application. And if you see that your transcript did not transfer over, just email us, the Office of Admissions, and we'll add that transcript to your application. Also, please note, you'll also have to add the Johns Hopkins School of Education, and we'll get that transferred for you automatically. And then interview may be required. An important deadline date, if you're interested in applying for fall 2024, the application deadline date is December 15, 2023. So all materials, including official transcripts, recommendation letters, test scores, all of that must be received by the Office of Admissions on or before December 15 for full consideration.
So I'm not totally sure I got your question. I think you're asking, right, it's a sort of general degree, but you go into specific professions. Is there a particular profession that's sort of more common or less common? As you're going through the PhD program, would you do things differently? Or are you on a different track if you want to be a professor versus if you want to be a researcher at Rand versus if you want to be an educational consultant? Okay, not really. You're in consultation with your advisor, you'd want to do different things. Not in a huge way, but kind of at the margins. So if you want to be a professor, you want to emphasize publishing, right? You want to get into academic journals. You want to think a little bit about which journals and if they're speaking to the right audience that you want to speak to. Whereas if you're a consultant, I don't think anyone like looks through and says like how many publications and which kind of journals to decide which consultant they want to hire. They want to hire a consultant with skills, and so you're wanting to build up your repertoire of skills. Maybe instead of getting really, really good at one skill, which is an academic, that's great. We want someone who's an expert in meta-analysis, or we want someone who's an expert in survey design. So in consultation with your advisor, as you sort of say, I want this kind of career, or I want that kind of career, begin to make choices as you get through the program about prioritizing these sorts of activities over those sorts of activities. Sure. So the question, well, I think we got it. So the question is, are there different tracks, different pathways through the PhD program depending on the profession you want? And the quick answer is you want that to be tailored through conversations with your advisor. Is the deadline for the PhD program the same each year? Approximately. So it's always going to be kind of middle of December, December 15th, sort of a nice round number, but it won't necessarily be exactly December 15th every year. You'll want to check as soon as you're sort of committing to apply, but that information is on the website pretty early on, like in the summer. So you'll have plenty of lead time to know exactly which day. Please.
That's for specific scholarships. I think all of us, or year, and we have those 3 letters of the combination. So we're desirable to have those letters from the
It's a great question. I don't think there's so the question is, given that we're all from Hopkins, is it more desirable to have Hopkins faculty recommending us?
Yes, but also like faculty in this field, like in education, because we might have.
Right. And so I think the bottom line is you want the faculty who can speak best about you. That said, I would say it's probably a little weird if you were here for a year and didn't connect with any of our faculty enough to get them to write you a letter of recommendation. And we know these people who are writing the letters of recommendation. So it's possible we put like have a little more faith in a strong letter from one of the faculty members here who we know, as opposed to, some faculty member in Dubuque, Iowa, who we've never met before. A balance is totally fine. Sorry, a little bit louder. Before you apply, do you have to publish something? No. So not going to hurt. It'll definitely signal that you have sort of better potential as a researcher because you've already been through the publication process. You kind of know what that's about. But we get a mix of applicants who've published things in journals, who've published op-ed sorts of things, who haven't. And so it's one of many, many factors that we look at, but there's certainly no requirement. So I had a little trouble hearing, but I think you're asking if I want to know sort of what the expertise of different professors is, where do I find that out? So the answer to both those questions, where do I find their email, how do I know who's interested in what, is on our website. So we have, and I want to differentiate two things. So on the kind of PhD page has a nice website. All our faculty members who tend to do stuff with the PhD program, who tend to take advisor, they're listed out, photos, and you click on the photo, and then you'll be taken to their page that has their website, their interest in it. But it is also sometimes possible that other faculty members from any other part of the School of Education would be willing to take on advisees. And so if you look through the PhD faculty and you don't see anyone who's a great fit, or you happen to know someone else, reach out to them and see if they might be interested in advising a PhD student. That's also possible. But the core group of PhD faculty that you'll find on that webpage is probably your best bets. So hopefully there's a fit there, but if you wanted maybe a co-advisor from some of the other faculty, that often works well too.
I can just tell you the online question. So we have an online question that asks, does the writing sample have to come from this field, or would an article you wrote for another graduate program be acceptable?
So great question. No hard and fast rule as to whether the writing sample that you put forth has to be education related or not. On average, we're going to get more excited to read something that's from the educational field. But if you've got this great publication that's, especially if it's maybe adjacent or has speaks to an educational issue a little bit. So if you wrote a great paper that got published in a sociology journal and it's about inequality, that might be a really good thing to send in. Both sociology and inequality are things we think a lot about in this program. But yeah, all things being equal, I would certainly send in something that is education related. at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out your promise as an educational researcher, not as an astrophysicist. Plus, I won't understand anything from your astrophysics paper.
Thank you, Dr. Gelbach. That's all the questions that we have in the Q&A at this point.
Great, and I think we're pretty much out of time here. So I do want to say a huge, there's one final question, and then I'll say my big thank you.
Secondly, if we can get back to the first, if we apply next year, because we have.
Sorry, say the first part again.
Does that mean we can get that offer if we apply this for next year?
So I think the trade-off for applying this year versus applying next year is you'll have more experience this year, it'll be way smarter in terms of how you're talking about educational research and conceptualizing a research question instead of just pitching a research topic. And so most people find that they turn into better applicants if you get through the entirety of your master's degree, as opposed to like a couple months into the master's degree you're applying to the PhD program. But there's no rule. We're happy to, we assume you will complete and graduate from that master's program. So there's nothing stopping you, but most people feel like they become stronger applicants for sure. So thank you guys so much. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning, but really appreciate your patience. And, I'm around. So if you have more questions, feel free to ping me with an email. Would be delighted if you ended up applying, whether it's this year or next. And yeah. I think Serena introduced herself at the beginning, and at the end, Raven snuck in the back. So if you can see her, because you're here in the room, two other great sources of information about the program. So especially on more sort of logistical questions, reach out to them. They're way smarter about that stuff. If it's more substantive sorts of questions, feel free to drop me a line. And thank you again for taking the time and for your interest.